Hello and welcome to another episode of the Halloween Podcast. I am your host, Lyle Perez, and you're listening to episode 45 of our special series, The Dark Record, where we uncover history's eeriest stories, one strange and unsettling case at a time. Airports are places of order and procedure. Passports stamped, identities verified, countries confirmed. But in the mid-20th century, one man stepped off a plane in Japan carrying documents from a nation that didn't exist. His papers were stamped, his story rehearsed, yet his country, Taured, was nowhere on Earth. The next entry into the dark record, the man from Taured. Let's begin. The legend of the man from Taured is usually told as if it came out of nowhere. A mysterious traveler at a Japanese airport, presenting documents from a country no one could find on a map. But behind that story is a real man, and his name was John Allen Kuchar Zagros. His case, while far less supernatural, was strange in its own right. In October of 1959, Japanese authorities arrested Zagros after he tried to cash large checks in Tokyo using documents that didn't add up. He carried passports and identification papers from multiple countries, complete with visas and embassy stamps. At first glance, the documents looked convincing, but closer inspection revealed something troubling. The stamps were forgeries, the seals fabricated, and the entire identity cobbled together from lies. Zagros was no ordinary traveler. He had crafted a persona as colorful as any spy novel. He claimed to have flown for Allied forces during World War II, and at times described himself as a freelance pilot. At other times, a covert operative with ties to embassies. His wife, a South Korean woman, traveled with him, further complicating his already tangled story. For a while, the web of claims, papers, and confidence carried him forward. But Japan's banking system and border officials eventually unraveled the ruse. The truth was that Zagros was a fraudster. He had invented countries of origin, false titles, and official-looking passports in an effort to move money and reinvent himself on the international stage. When the Japanese court examined the evidence, they concluded his documents were pure fabrication. He was sentenced to a year in prison, and during the proceedings, he attempted suicide in the courtroom. Surviving the attempt, he ultimately served his sentence and was later deported. His wife was sent to South Korea. For investigators, the Zagros case was a sobering reminder of how easily paperwork could be forged in an era before digital databases and biometric checks. For the public, however, the story took on a life of its own. By the time newspapers reported on the case in 1960, key details had already shifted. Instead of Zagros, the man was described as coming from Taured, a country no one could locate. In some versions, the capital city was named as Tamanrasset, a real place in the Sahara, but positioned as if it were part of a non-existent nation. What began as the trial of a con artist soon evolved into something stranger. Through repetition, mistranslation, and embellishment, Zagros was transformed into a traveler from nowhere, a man with papers from a land the Earth had never known. When John Zagros stood in a Tokyo courtroom in 1960, his story might have ended as little more than a footnote about forged passports and a failed fraud. But within months, newspapers began retelling the case, and in the retelling, details changed. A Canadian paper, The Province, carried an article that exaggerated his origins. Instead of a fabricated collection of documents, the report claimed he came from a country called Taured, situated somewhere in Africa. Readers were left with the impression that this was not just a case of forgery, but of a man representing a nation no one had ever heard of. the tale gained momentum in an unlikely place, the British House of Commons. In July 1960, during a discussion about international travel documents, a member of Parliament referenced the case, calling the man's homeland Taured and naming its capital as Tamanrasset. The details were muddled, but the mention gave the story an air of official legitimacy. If it was raised in Parliament, surely it must have had some truth to it. From there, the legend began to detach from reality. The French science fiction writer Jacques Bergier retold the story in the 1960s, placing Taured not in Africa, but in Eastern Europe, and framing the traveler as if he had stepped from another world. Other authors soon followed, embellishing the narrative with new details. The man vanished from a locked hotel room, his documents disappeared, and no trace of him was ever found. Each retelling stripped away the mundane facts of fraud and replaced them with mystery. By the 1970s and 80s, the story had fully crystallized into the form most people know today. A well-dressed man arrives at Haneda Airport in Tokyo, carrying a passport from Taured, a country that does not exist. He insists he has visited Japan before, pointing to visas and stamps. Officials, baffled, detain him at a hotel under guard. But by morning, he is gone. The locked room is empty. The mysterious traveler vanished as suddenly as he appeared. This version had all the hallmarks of an urban legend. It contained official settings, an airport, border security, embassies, that lent it plausibility. It featured unexplained vanishing, a trope as old as folklore itself. And it ended with no resolution, ensuring that the mystery could never truly be solved. Unlike Zagros, who had been sentenced and deported, the man from Taured seemed to slip through the cracks of reality itself. What had started as a court case about a forger became something else entirely, a modern myth of a man from another dimension. Taured was no longer the invention of a fraudster. It was a doorway to parallel worlds, opened briefly in the bustle of a Japanese airport.
Do you love the strange, the unexplained, and the downright terrifying? Horrifying History takes you on a chilling journey into the dark corners of the past, where history and horror collide. From haunted places and ghostly legends to unsolved mysteries and terrifyingly true stories, you will uncover the twisted facts that history books leave out. Who were the real monsters behind infamous legends? What dark secrets lie buried in the pages of history? Every episode, we reveal the eerie truths that will send shivers down your spine. Are you brave enough to face the darkness? Horrifying History, available now wherever you listen to your podcasts. But don't wait for too long. The past might just come looking for you. Listen if you dare.
As captivating as the legend is, the reality behind the man from Taured looks very different once we separate fact from fiction. The man at the heart of the story wasn't a mysterious traveler from another dimension. He was John Allen Kuchar Zagros, a documented fraudster with a flair for invention. The records from Tokyo are clear. In 1959, Zagros was arrested for forging passports and attempting to cash fraudulent checks. The supposed stamps and visas in his documents were fakes, not interdimensional evidence. His story about being a pilot, a diplomat, or a covert operative shifted depending on who he spoke to, but investigators found no proof for any of it. He was tried in court, sentenced to a year in prison, and deported. His wife was sent back to South Korea. These details, preserved in Japanese reports and later summarized in sources like Skeptoid and Wikipedia, leave little room for supernatural speculation. So where did the myth take over? Part of the confusion came from the press. Newspapers outside Japan retold the story with inaccuracies, introducing the name Taured and situating it in Africa. Then, when the British House of Commons referenced the case, the slip of the tongue, Taured with an I instead of an E, cemented the error. By the time Jacques Bergier and other writers picked it up in the 1960s, the story had been transformed from forgery into folklore. Snopes and other fact-checkers note that the supernatural additions, the vanishing from a locked hotel room, the insistence that Taured had existed for centuries, the idea of an alternate dimension, are entirely absent from the original case files. They appear only in later retellings, likely added to increase drama. What was once a lesson in the vulnerability of international travel systems became a tale of parallel universes. This transformation fits a broader pattern seen in folklore. Real events are messy, complicated, and often disappointing in their banality. But when filtered through rumor, mistranslation, and the human desire for wonder, they become stories that capture the imagination. The man who was really a con artist becomes instead a dimensional traveler. The fraudulent papers become artifacts of another reality. The disappearance from the record books, after his deportation, turns into a literal disappearance from a locked room. What makes the man from Taured endure is not evidence, but narrative. The story scratches at one of our deepest fascinations, the idea that other worlds exist just out of sight, and that sometimes they brush up against our own. Even when facts point to forgery, the myth clings to the possibility of the extraordinary. In the end, Zagreus was very real and very human, flawed, desperate, and inventive. But the man from Taured, the parallel universe traveler, lives on in folklore, reminding us that the truth is often far less powerful than the story we want to believe. By the late 20th century, the man from Taured had left the courtroom behind and entered the realm of folklore. Stripped of John Zagreus's fraud conviction, the story grew legs of its own, carried into books on the paranormal, fringe science magazines, and eventually the boundless echo chamber of the internet. In the 1980s and 90s, the tale was retold in collections of unexplained mysteries. Each time it appeared, the details shifted. Sometimes the traveler arrived at Haneda Airport, sometimes Narita. In some versions, he was questioned for hours, insisting that Taured had existed for 1,000 years between France and Spain. In others, he confidently pointed to Andorra on a map, insisting it was mislabeled. Nearly every version ended with the same eerie twist. The man was held overnight in a guarded hotel room, only to vanish without a trace by morning. No footprints, no exit, no explanation. This reimagined ending transformed the story from bureaucratic oddity to paranormal enigma. Instead of a fraudster tried in court, the man became a possible interdimensional traveler. His vanishing mirrored classic motifs in folklore: the stranger who appears suddenly, the locked room mystery, the disappearance that resists all explanation. In the early 2000s, the story found new life online. Paranormal forums, conspiracy sites, and YouTube creators embraced the man from Taured as proof of parallel universes. TikTok videos today dramatize the tale, complete with eerie sound effects and grainy photos of passports. Reddit threads dissect whether the case could be evidence of multiverse theory. In a cultural moment fascinated by alternate realities, thanks to science fiction, quantum speculation, and blockbuster films, the story fits perfectly. What makes Taured especially enduring is the presence of official trappings. Passports, visas, immigration stamps. These are the very documents meant to define borders and confirm identity. If even those can be called into question, it suggests our sense of nation and reality is more fragile than we'd like to admit. A man with papers from a country that doesn't exist strikes at the heart of modern order, making the legend all the more unsettling. In Japan, the story is sometimes retold as a local ghost tale of the airport. In the West, it is framed as evidence of multiverse slip-throughs. In both cases, the myth has detached from its origins. Few mention Zagreus or his forged checks. Instead, they repeat the legend of a man who stepped out of another world, handed over proof of its existence, and then disappeared as mysteriously as he came. Whether dismissed as an urban legend or embraced as a hint of hidden realities, the man from Taured has achieved cultural immortality. He may never have existed as the story claims, but in folklore, he exists everywhere, forever in transit, caught between borders that may not even be real.
Member Week is back at Lowe's with big savings for pros. Now through October 15th, My Lowe's Pro Rewards members get up to 40% off hundreds of items like paint, tools, building materials, and more. Plus, get free standard shipping. Shop these exclusive member-only savings before they're gone. Not a rewards member? Join for free today. Free standard shipping not available in Alaska and Hawaii. Exclusions and more terms apply. Loyalty program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms. Subject to change.
Do you love the strange, the unexplained, and the downright terrifying? Horrifying History takes you on a chilling journey into the dark corners of the past, where history and horror collide. From haunted places and ghostly legends to unsolved mysteries and terrifyingly true stories, you will uncover the twisted facts that history books leave out. Who were the real monsters behind infamous legends? What dark secrets lie buried in the pages of history? Every episode, we reveal the eerie truths that will send shivers down your spine. Are you brave enough to face the darkness? Horrifying History, available now wherever you listen to your podcasts. But don't wait for too long. The past might just come looking for you. Listen if you dare.
What stays with me about the man from Taured isn't whether he really came from another world. It's how quickly the ordinary can be reshaped into the extraordinary. At its core, this story began with John Zagreus, a man spinning lies with forged passports, trying to create a new identity. There's nothing supernatural about that. It's desperation, ingenuity, and fraud rolled into one. And yet, within a few years, his case was transformed into one of the most enduring modern legends. I think that transformation says more about us than it does about him. People are drawn to gaps in the record, to stories that resist easy answers. The idea of someone vanishing from a locked hotel room, carrying proof of a nation that doesn't exist, is irresistible because it challenges the foundations of how we understand the world. Nations, borders, identity, these are the things we treat as fixed. If even they can blur, then maybe reality itself isn't as solid as we think. There's also a comfort in the supernatural explanation. Fraudsters are common, but visitors from another dimension, those are rare. Choosing the mysterious version allows the story to endure, retold again and again in books, on websites, in late-night conversations about parallel universes. It becomes not just a cautionary tale about deception, but a reminder of how much we long for the world to be stranger than it seems. For me, The Man from Taured highlights the fragile line between fact and folklore. A man stood in a courtroom facing charges of forgery. That's history. But in the retelling, he walked through an airport from a country that never existed, and that's legend. Both stories now coexist, and in a way, both are true. Not because the details match, but because the legend has become part of our culture. In the end, perhaps the real mystery isn't where Taured lies on a map. It's how a man like Zagreus vanished from the record of history, only to live forever in the imagination. That brings us to the end of episode 45 of The Dark Record. We've traced the strange story of the man from Taured, beginning with John Zagreus, a fraudster with forged documents, and ending with the legend of a traveler from another dimension. The facts tell us he was tried, sentenced, and deported. But the myth tells us he vanished into thin air, leaving behind only a passport from a place that never was. Whether you see him as a criminal or a cross-dimensional visitor, the story lingers, remembered, retold, and now added to the record. Next time, we'll turn to the windswept town of Amherst, Nova Scotia. In the 1870s, a young woman named Esther Cox became the center of Canada's most famous haunting. For nearly 2 years, her home was plagued by raps, fires, and violent attacks from forces no one could see. We'll explore the Great Amherst Mystery. Until then, I'm Lyle Perez, and this has been the Halloween Podcast presenting The Dark Record. If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. It helps keep the show alive and weird. You can also explore sources, extras, and more at our Facebook page at facebook.com/The Halloween Podcast or at our website, thehalloweenpodcast.com. Thanks for listening. Keep your eyes on the shadows. And remember, borders can be drawn in ink, but some travelers come from places no map can hold. Have a good night.
Do you love the strange, the unexplained, and the downright terrifying? Horrifying History takes you on a chilling journey into the dark corners of the past, where history and horror collide. From haunted places and ghostly legends to unsolved mysteries and terrifyingly true stories, you will uncover the twisted facts that history books leave out. Who were the real monsters behind infamous legends? What dark secrets lie buried in the pages of history? Every episode, we reveal the eerie truths that will send shivers down your spine. Are you brave enough to face the darkness? Horrifying History, available now wherever you listen to your podcasts. But don't wait for too long. The past might just come looking for you. Listen if you dare.